Right, so what on earth does Keir Starmer think he's doing? How the heck does he think he's going to get away with this latest stunt of his? He's giving his political rivals a field day over it, and he's going to end up becoming more hated than ever, and he is now apparently already the most hated Prime Minister in modern British history, which, given the actions of other notable examples, certainly within my lifetime, that's quite the achievement in less than 6 months in power, isn't it? The most hated British Prime Minister in modern British history. But then, what do you expect from a guy without a single redeeming feature whatsoever, who has lied all the way to get where he is today, and he's come unstuck as liars always do? No amount of resets or relaunches will fix that simple fact, when the one constant in the equation is the biggest issue for most voters these days, and that is Keir Starmer himself. So how to deal with those voters? Well, how about taking their vote away from them so they can't have a say about Starmer anymore? How about cancelling the local elections he's running severely scared of, given the seats he's been losing and the scale of the losses in by-elections triggered in the aftermath of the general election? Because if the public see the scale of the hatred, or worse, his own party, then they might come for him. Resorting to dictatorship masked as reform is the last resort of a dying and completely anti-democratic administration, and it has happened so fast it beggars belief. If Starmer thought he was hated before, though, try denying people the ability to send a message to you and vote for someone else, because if that's the case, you've seen nothing yet, Keith.
There are 21 county councils in England and 10 unitary authorities as well, all up for election in May. Will every one of those elections go ahead, Minister?
So more details will follow later on. I'll be making a statement in Parliament this afternoon that will set out the detail of that. But this is an open invitation. So they won't be then, Minister? But it's an open invitation for councillors who want to be part of an early tranche of reorganisation and devolution.
Why aren't they all going ahead?
And I would say, even before the white paper has been published,
maybe there's a problem with the line. Why aren't they going ahead, Minister?
Well, at the moment, the assumption is that elections are going ahead. However, it's usual in a process of reorganisation that when a council makes a request for reorganisation, that if there are elections taking place to a council that it essentially won't exist within the term of those elections, then you hold off the elections and you elect to a shadow body, the shadow body basically is a form of the new councils that will follow.
Right, so that was Jim McMahon there, the local government minister trying to defend the indefensible by trying to hide behind reforms to local authorities as an excuse to see some of those local elections not happen at all. Basically placing the ball in the court of those councils at that, as to whether they would want to elect what he calls a shadow body, a body that stays in place and runs the show whilst reforms to council areas are completed. The white paper McMahon referring to there being the English devolution white paper, which proposes changes to local authorities, granting them new powers, yes, devolution, reforming them, though, also into what are being called strategic authorities. But all in all, it just amounts to a moving around of the goalposts in that respect. These aren't dramatic changes that should inhibit either the functioning of the local or unitary authorities. They still have to carry on despite the changes happening, of course. Electing the people still running the show whilst these reforms are ongoing makes no difference to the process at all. Councils still need councillors, yes, but who they are can still be decided at the right relevant time. But in the name of these reforms, Starmer and co are attempting to kick local elections down the road for another year or two, which completely smacks them an attempt to run away from what Starmer knows would be catastrophically bad results for Labour under his leadership, hated by the country as he is, and he hopes by stalling them, his party can turn the country around a bit, and people will be a lot happier and more inclined to vote Labour again. What he doesn't get is that he is the biggest problem Labour have right now. And delaying these elections now, frankly, I think will make matters worse. Not only because this is completely undemocratic, blatantly cowardly, and a dictatorial move by Starmer to wrest control away from the people, the only bit of power the people have, their vote, to deny them their say in who runs their local areas, local services for the next couple of years, for no other reason than to just protect himself from bad results, is him all over. People hate Keir Starmer. He lied to get elected Prime Minister, his lies have been exposed, he's torn up the promises he made going into the election and has moved the goalposts there. Nobody voted for him to do that, nobody voted for him to deny them their vote or stand on what he wants people to judge him on now, deny them their vote in upcoming local elections as well. He just keeps on lying instead, keeps on proving to the country what a dishonest charlatan of a man he is. Right down to the word change, not even meaning change in his case, but literally exactly the same nonsense as the 14 years of the Tories we've already suffered under that we kicked into touch back in July. What is happening here is entirely subjective. Councils will still be running right up until the time various wards or boundaries become amalgamated into these new strategic authorities, whatever boundary changes happen. But the way McMahon presented this in the House of Commons yesterday implies there is an element of choice on the part of the councils in that question, therefore Starmer kicking the blame onto them to a large extent. Here's an excerpt from Squawkbox's article titled Fritz Starmer Cancels 2025 Local Elections to Avoid Trouncing, well worth a read in its entirety, that spells out McMahon's response and therefore Starmer's out. However, asked today by a Tory MP whether he was willing to rule out such cancellations, McMahon still wriggled and claimed to be direct while still padding his language as much as he could, but admitted that the plan, in all things I try to be direct, and I have been direct in saying that if those councils that come to the government with a request for reorganisation meet the test and have a credible programme in place, the elections will likely not take place until the year after, because they will be postponed to elect the shadow authority that would replace the county and the districts. We are clear on that. We give the Honourable Lady assurance there will not be a mass cancelling of elections for the sake of it. There will not be a mass cancellation for the sake of it, but all councils that credibly come forward, again entirely subjective, will not have local elections next May. McMahon's logic is unsound. Presumably he knows it, because local elections can easily be held in plenty of wards and districts that would not exist by the time the full term was served to ensure voters are not denied their say. Absolutely right, and of course that spells out in no uncertain terms what an undemocratic, opportunistic and completely unnecessary move all of this is to move forward with any cancellations. Who will be the ones most likely to cancel then? Well, Labour-held authorities, I dare say. I think it comes across pretty obviously. They will be the ones who will vote to not hold elections, and when it would surprise me not one little bit if we find out at some point down the line that Labour-held authorities were getting leaned on by the Starmer regime right now in order to cancel. Helped to cancel, possibly, thereby preventing Labour losing control of any authorities they currently hold going into those May local elections. The story will be about councillors they do lose elsewhere, but they won't lose local power and they will mitigate the damage done because Starmer is so scared of bad results, of which I, like many others, having been saying could well be historically bad for the Labour Party in May. Such is the level of hatred for this liar we're stuck with as Prime Minister. He has also gifted his opponents an open goal over this, though. For as much as Labour are being told that carrying on as they are by trying to outfash the fascists, all they are actually doing is helping them in the long run, and that fear that Starmer's inability to do anything meaningful or even likeable, despite having a transformative majority if he chose to do that, by doing nothing instead, as he is choosing to do, by wasting the opportunity he has to really make something of this country, he is instead ushering in an even more hard-right government, helpfully aided and abetted by the mainstream media, who, of course, are platforming the objections of the likes of Nigel Farage above all others, and his private company masquerading as a political party, Reform UK Limited. And the scary thing is, with that setup, should Farage be elected PM, he literally would be a dictator, since there is no democracy within his own sham of a party, let alone would there be under his regime running the country, as increasingly looks to be a possibility thanks to Keir Starmer being so petty and self-serving. Whilst the right-wing rags fixate on Farage and various Tory mouthpieces, though, Ellie Chowns of the Green Party put McMahon on the spot over this white paper in terms of democracy. And while she didn't exactly get an acceptable answer, but this is absolutely the opposition we should be being offered by our media.
I welcome the elements of this white paper that are about devolution, but we have to recognise that some elements are about concentration. The Minister has talked about the two-tier premium, but the reality is that his proposals mean that a local tier in some places will be replaced by a more distant mayoral tier. Does the Minister recognise that this risks creating a bit of a democratic deficit? Surely we should be trying to keep the local in local government as much as possible. And given that average turnout in the last lot of mayoral elections in the last year was 30%, what will he do to address that risk of democratic deficit? And in particular, will he introduce a fair and proportional system for local elections?
Thank you. I mean, the truth is that these strategic authorities are about taking power from this place and giving it down to communities. Every minister gets hundreds of sign-offs every single day. But I can tell you the number of sign-offs where the minister and members across will remember this, have to sign off whether or not a cyclist should pass through a local park because the parish council has to apply to central government for permission, is part of the centralising nature of this state that we've got to change.
Devolution she agreed with, so McMahon spoke about an example of devolved powers. But the whole shebang, the whole notion of cancelling elections is not democratic. That's the bit we need an answer to. And it's little wonder in so many cases in recent months where local by-elections have been held, the Green Party have eaten solidly into Labour's vote. But you won't see examples like that question from a Green MP in mainstream media because they don't get the press. Yet there is someone asking a relevant question there in the interest of their constituents and not themselves, a huge difference between the likes of Farage braying about Starmer being a dictator when he can't even be bothered to show up for his own constituents in Clacton, when I think he would be one too, given the chance, and he's got a real chance thanks to Starmer. This story should make Starmer hated far more and not in any way less. And I fully expect Labour's fortunes to keep worsening the more they play petty games with power instead of using it to make this country better. There is scant sign they have the desire or talent to do either. Meanwhile, this is just the latest scandal befalling Starmer as reforms to the legal system have got people up in arms too. And with Starmer's past track record as a barrister, and a KC no less, this move to get court case backlogs down by removing what is one of the key pillars of justice itself, well, people just can't believe Starmer is the one doing this. Get all the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe before you do so though, if you've not done so already, to keep up to date with more daily content and help support the channel, which is massively appreciated. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers folks.